A chilling wind swept across the ancient pines, weaving through the branches like a cautious spirit. Lanterns cradled in the boughs of gnarled trees flickered, casting uneven light on the forest floor below. At the nexus of twisted roots and mossy stones stood a lone figure, a Tengu warlord, draped in crimson robes. His face bore the proud features of a raven, with a long pointed nose and keen eyes that radiated a cunning intelligence. His wings, folded against his back, trembled ever so slightly with pent-up fury. This was Karasu Takeru, once a wandering swordsman, now burdened with the duty of protecting the forest from an evil surge that threatened all living things within. In centuries past, Karasu roamed from one mountaintop stronghold to the next, forging alliances with the Tengu clans that called the high peaks their home. He had lived for untold years, learning from sages and samurai, collecting secrets of swordsmanship and honing his uncanny Tengu powers. But something about the quietude of the forest always drew him back. Despite his warlike bearing and imposing aura, he felt most at peace when venturing under the ancient canopy, hidden from mortal eyes. Perhaps it was the memory of how the forest welcomed him when all else was lost, when he had fallen from grace in the Tengu courts, betrayed by fellow warriors for speaking against needless bloodshed. But no longer could he be a mere solitary wanderer. A vile presence had spread like poison in the hidden corners of the land. Ogres and twisted spirits prowled in the dark hours of the night, leaving behind clawed footprints and scattered bone. Peasants who had once paid offerings to the forest now feared to enter even the glades at daylight, whispering of monstrous shapes with glowing eyes. And these rumours had carried on the wind to Karasu's keen ears. He knew that if this blight remained unchecked, it would stain every grotto, every stream, and every old cedar grove until nothing remained but barren soil. He found his first ally in a hillside glade, where the faint sound of a flute lured him. Following the melancholic tune, he came upon a kitsune's spirit, her coat of 9 tails shimmering beneath the moonlight. Her name was Tsuki, and she possessed a remarkable gift for illusions. She put her flute aside and regarded Karasu with a wary eye. Tengu were known for their pranks, for their illusions of grandeur. Yet she saw no mischief in his stance. His brow was lined with concern, showing a singular purpose, to protect the forest and all who dwelled within. "Why have you come?" she asked, tails swishing in the gloom. The lantern in her hair flickered softly, revealing eyes as sharp as daggers. Karasu inclined his head politely, remembering how fox spirits prized courtesy. "I've heard reports of ravaging spirits and unknown terrors. I come not for dominion, but for alliance. If a darkness is creeping through these woods, we must unite, or else we will fall individually." Tsuki studied him for a long moment, the tension in the air so thick that even the surrounding trees seemed to hold their breath. "Very well," she finally said. "Come with me, and we shall see who else can be rallied to our cause." The weight in her voice was matched by a silent relief, for Tsuki too had sensed the malevolence stirring in the hidden pockets of the forest. What she could not face alone might be vanquished by a unified front. Under the starlit canopy, the pair ventured deeper into the woods, guided by Tsuki's knowledge of secret pathways and ancient oaths. Her illusions parted the misty veils, revealing clusters of yokai and lesser spirits who lived in quiet corners. Some were shy, trembling at the Tengu's formidable presence, while others merely observed with cool detachment. Yet each group carried stories of ghostly attacks or missing kin. Inspiration simmered in every hushed warning and every anxious glance. At the spiritual heart of the forest lay an ancient shrine dedicated to the mountain kami, enclosed by the roots of a colossal cedar. It was there that Karasu hoped to gather potential allies. The trunk of the cedar loomed like a guardian pillar, festooned with paper wards and the faint glow of protective enchantments. Once a place of communal worship, the shrine had fallen into disrepair, a mirror of the forest's vulnerable state. With Tsuki's help, Kara sent word to various spirits, Kodama, who dwelled in old trunks, Kanuki that roamed the ridges, and even a duo of mischievous Yukian, who seldom left their icy domain. They trickled in, one by one, or in pairs, all wearing uncertain expressions. At first, they gathered under the cedar with an air of uneasy truce creatures that typically played pranks on each other or competed for territory were now forced to stand side by side. Before them all, Karasu Tekeru stepped onto a flat stone that had once served as an altar. He cleared his throat, his voice resonating even before he spoke. "Friends," he began, "enemies and strangers alike. You know that a darkness spreads through our home. Shadows move among the roots, twisting the hearts of mortal and spirit alike. Tonight we gather not to remember old grudges, but to ensure there is a future for all." His fiery eyes swept across the assemblage. "I vow to lead any who would join me. But make no mistake, this battle will test us in ways we've never been tested before. If we stand united, we stand a chance. If we scatter, we perish alone." The hush that followed was so profound that the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. At length, a quiet voice piped up, a Kodama perched on a low branch. "We have seen dark insects devouring the bark of our siblings. Our once bright leaves turn black at their touch." Another spirit, a tanuki, clenched his little fists. "A monstrous Oni has been sighted near the old well, carrying a spiked club. He hunts at night and leaves no survivors." We can't face him alone. Encouraged by these confessions, more voices joined in, each describing strange phenomena. A vengeful spirit prowling an abandoned shrine. A monstrous boar with blazing red eyes decimating entire groves, and ghostly lights luring travelers astray, never to be seen again. Whispers of an overlord. An ancient entity known only as the Devourer began to surface. "I've heard of the Devourer," Karasu said gravely, "an ancient evil that desires to gorge on living energy, both mortal and immortal. He lurks in the darkest recesses of the land and sends his minions to weaken us. If we do not unite, we'll be overtaken, one spirit at a time." A somber silence settled over the motley crowd. Many of the lesser spirits trembled, not out of cowardice, but from the realization of how dire the situation truly was. Karasu folded his wings around himself, as though wreathed in a protective cloak of red feathers and mystic power. "I propose we form a watchful force that patrols the forest. We will share news, mobilize swiftly, and strike these threats before they have time to root. Suki will coordinate illusions to conceal our movements. Meanwhile, I pledge to train those willing in Tengu sword arts, or in how best to use their own gifts in battle." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Though their alliance was fragile and new, something in the Tengu's steadfast aura inspired hope. He wasn't just a braggart warlord. He was a warrior who had seen lands devastated by cruelty and chaos. His vow had weight enough to resonate with spirits who had few reasons to trust outsiders. That very night, the newly formed alliance began its first patrol. Karasu and Suki led a small group of Tanuki and Kodama along the forest's eastern boundary, traveling beneath the broad net of moonlight. The wind carried the distant roar of something unnatural, like rock scraping against bone, stirring a primal fear in even the bravest among them. Nonetheless, they moved quietly, guided by Suki's illusions masking their churned footprints. As they navigated a narrow pass, the uneasy hush was shattered by an ear-splitting roar. From behind a dead oak lumbered a colossal boar with elongated tusks, each as sharp as a blade. Its eyes burned red with malevolence, and a black miasma clung to its bristled hide. Without warning, it charged. Suki reacted swiftly, conjuring an illusory wall that shimmered in the moonlight. Confused, the boar skidded to a halt, snorting as it tried to discern reality from illusion. In that split second, Karasu catapulted himself forward, brandishing his sword with inhuman grace. "Storm up!" he shouted, his voice cracking like thunder. Kodama darted to reclaim vantage points in the trees, pelting the boar with enchanted seeds that sprouted into thorny brambles upon contact. The tanuki, wielding shape-shifting abilities, turned themselves into oversized boulders to block the boar's escape route. Yet the creature was no easy foe. Fueled by the foul aura that had corrupted its spirit, it lashed out with terrifying power, snapping the brambles and scattering the tanuki. Karasu grit his pointed teeth, weaving past the boar's tusks to deliver swift strikes with the shining blade he carried. Blue sparks erupted where steel met monstrous hide, and the forest floor shook with the boar's furious stampeding. At the height of the chaos, Zuki launched a final, breathtaking illusion. A swarm of shimmering foxfires, shaped to resemble spectral wolves. Hemmed in on all sides, the boar thrashed and bellowed, only to be met by Karasu's sword in a final, decisive blow. A monstrous scream tore from the boar's throat, and the foul black miasma dissipated in a wave of acrid smoke, leaving behind a husk of its former self. The body slowly reverted to that of a normal beast, freed from the devourer's taint. Everyone caught their breath. Kodama turned their eyes away in remorse, aware that this was once just another creature of the forest, corrupted against its will. Karasu murmured a brief prayer over the boar's remains. "May your spirit find peace at last," he whispered solemnly. Then he turned to the others. "This victory is ours, but it's only the first step. We must continue." Word of the boar's defeat spread quickly among the forest inhabitants. Bolstering morale, more spirits joined the alliance, hopeful that unity might indeed hold back the darkness. Each day, small parties ventured out to cleanse corrupted groves, disarm twisted illusions, and rescue the frightened. Nights were spent in the shrine's courtyard, forging bonds over shared meals and training by moonlight. Amid these efforts, the bond between Karasu and Zuki deepened in unexpected ways. Both had spent much of their lives maintaining barriers, Karasu keeping others at wing's length and Zuki relying on illusions to safeguard her vulnerabilities. But now, confronting hidden horrors side by side, they found reasons to trust. During an evening stroll, Karasu discovered her playing a soft, longing melody on her flute near a pond. He approached quietly, his wings trailing behind, wanting to give her space, but finding himself drawn to her gentle presence. "You play beautifully," he said, voice hushed as if afraid to break the spell. Suki merely nodded, then placed the flute in her lap. "Sometimes I wonder how many battles we'll have to fight before peace is no longer just an illusion." A melancholy reflection glimmered in her eyes before she turned them toward Karasu. "Being with you all, working together, perhaps that is what makes me believe again." "Maybe that's enough." Before Karasu could respond, a faint tremor shook the earth, so mild that only their heightened senses picked it up. Karasu's feathers bristled. Something was shifting, converging like a great tide. The forest's hush was palpable, as though every leaf and root sensed what was to come. The next day, a small group of spirits brought word to Karasu of sightings near a remote swamp at the southern edge of the forest. Something massive was stirring there, unseen, but certainly felt. Convinced that this signaled an advance of the Devourer's forces, Karasu marshaled a larger contingent. It included not just Tanuki and Kodama, but a few powerful yokai. One was a giant, one-eyed Oini named Noburo, who claimed to have renounced chaos in search of atonement. Another was Hoshi, a kappa whose watery shell glowed with spiritual runes. Despite old rivalry with river spirits, Karasu had welcomed anyone willing to fight the greater menace. Their trek took them across rocky ravines and hidden waterfalls, each step leading them closer to the heart of the looming corruption. At last they arrived at the swamp, a murky expanse choked with reeds and thick black water. A hazy miasma hung in the air like a toxic shroud. Where once waterfowl might have nested, no life stirred. All was still, suffocated by the rotting stench that rose off the fetid waters. Moving cautiously, they fanned out. Noburo's single eye glowed faintly in the gloom, scanning for signs of movement. Hoshi glided through the shallows, armed with the knowledge that kappa excelled in aquatic terrain. Suki remained close to Karasu, illusions at the ready to mask them from prying eyes. The tension was a heavy weight on all. Then the stillness erupted into chaos. From beneath the swamp waters rose monstrous forms, stitched from mud and decaying vines, their faces featureless except for vacant glowing orbs. One lunged at Noburo, who intercepted with a massive blow of his club. Another lunged at Hoshi, who countered with a surge of swirling water that crashed into the creature, sending clods of mud flying. All around them, more of these mud amalgamations emerged, as if the swamp itself had come to life in a twisted reflection of creation. The alliance, though startled, bolstered each other. Kodama fired swift bursts of energy from the safety of tree branches, while Tanuki shapeshifted into giant logs to bowl the enemies over. Suki's illusions scattered the creature's dim wits, leading them astray or luring them into sinkholes. In the midst of this swirling combat, Karasu soared into the air, scanning for the one controlling these foul minions. And there, near the center of the swamp, towered a monstrous figure, a hulking mass of shadows and sinew, crowned by the faint glimmer of a twisted horn. Karasu felt his blood run cold. Even from a distance, he sensed that this was more than an underling. It might be the Devourer itself, or at least one of its most powerful avatars. The figure lifted a gnarled staff, commanding the mud creatures with silent authority. Their spindly arms and snarling mud maws moved in a concerted storm, pressing the alliance closer to the swamp's center. Choosing decisive action, Karasu streaked through the air, sword flashing in a lethal arc. He blocked the staff's downward strike, meeting the beast head-on with a reverberating clash. A wave of dark power exploded outwards, knocking spirits off their feet. The swirl of corruption crackled around them, the Devourer's aura chilling to the very bone. Eyes narrowed, Karasu pressed forward, focusing intently on each move. His Tengu training made him a master of misdirection and speed, yet the swirling darkness pressed in, weakening his balance as if the swamp itself sought to ensnare him. A prayer on his lips, he focused his ki to repel the miasma. Sparks of blue lightning crackled around his sword as he remembered the sacred arts taught by the mountain sages. In a blur of steel, he directed a slash teeming with spiritual energy. The air reverberated with a clap of thunder, and for an instant the darkness parted. Emboldened, Zuki dispatched illusions that shimmered like silver foxes leaping across the swamp. They darted into the monster's path, forcing it to recoil. Norboro, moving with surprising agility despite his size, slammed his club onto a chunk of elevated ground, creating a tremor that destabilized the beast further. Finally, Hoshi harnessed the swamp waters themselves to form a swirling vortex, dragging the mud creatures back to their murky lair. With the Devourer's attention fractured, Karasu seized a critical opening, striking with the full might of his Tengu swordsmanship. A directed slash cleaved the monster's staff in two. Shocked, the hulking figure bellowed in an unholy voice, stumbling backward as the flickering aura around it sputtered, its crimson eyes disengaged from the alliance, fixating instead on Karasu with a venomous glare that promised retribution if it survived. But the allies didn't falter. With a roar, Noburo smashed his club into the beast's torso, toppling it. Tsuki conjured a final wave of foxfires that converged upon the Devourer's avatar, each flame burning away a layer of the vile corruption. Karasu thrust his sword forward, delivering a finishing blow that pierced the beast's heart. A swirl of blighted energy erupted, shaking the swamp with a force that rattled the trees for leagues around. In seconds, the Devourer's avatar and its creations were reduced to pools of black tar that sank into the earth. A hush fell over the swamp. The air, though still heavy, no longer crackled with evil potency. Creatures from the Alliance peered around, battered but triumphant. For a moment, all was still, as though the very spirit of the forest paused to recognize their sacrifice. Yet Karasu's victory brought no simple relief. He felt an emptiness at the edge of his consciousness, as if the devourer had only withdrawn for now. This had not been its true, complete form, and Karasu sensed that further battles lay ahead. The presence was too cunning, too pervasive to have been entirely eradicated. Nonetheless, they had forced it to retreat. They had shattered its strongest foothold in that swamp. Perhaps it would be enough to grant the forest room to heal, and time for the alliance to grow stronger. The battered group withdrew from the fetid mud, forging a slow path back in relative silence. Only the reassuring hand Suki placed upon Karasu's shoulder gave him reason to soldier on, despite exhaustion gnawing at his bones. The forest spirits had triumphed, where they might have in another age fought each other or scattered in terror. Now, for the first time in centuries, they stood as one, masters of their domain rather than hapless pawns to any lurking terror. By moonlight, they returned to the ancient shrine beneath the great cedar. The battered structure welcomed them with the glow of faint wards still scrawled across its timbers. Karasu could almost hear the forest's sigh of relief through the night wind, though that might have been wishful thinking. The alliance gathered in the courtyard, some battered, all exhausted. Soft expressions of gratitude were exchanged among mismatched spirits who had shed blood for one another. For Karasu, an unexpected warmth filled his chest. This was what he had always sought but never quite realized, a community, no, a family, united by more than just survival. In the days that followed, the forest began its tentative healing. Kodama guided new seeds into rotting clearings, while Tanuki and Oni worked side by side to rebuild shattered groves and restore shrines. Waterways, once clogged by decay, now flowed clearer under the watchful eye of the Kappa. When travelers passed near the forest's edge, they noticed that the path felt safer, as though unseen guardians watched from the foliage, warding away hidden threats. Even mortal villagers, hearing tales of the Tengu warlord and his coalition of yokai, began leaving token offerings of rice and sake at the ancient shrine once more. Karasu himself assumed a more settled role, carefully training the alliance in martial disciplines and leading group patrols. When last snows began melting from the mountaintops, he stood on a vantage point overlooking the forest. The dawn lit the vast sea of foliage in tones of muted gold, and for once, no haunting roars or ill omens rose with the early light. Suki approached, her illusions subdued, a bright glint of curiosity in her gaze. "You still stand watch, night after night," she observed quietly. "Are you waiting for the devourer's return, or do you anticipate a new threat?" "They are one and the same," he replied, lifting the corners of his beak-like mouth in what served as a subtle smile. "I will always be vigilant, but now I am not alone." Zuki nodded, a gentle grin shaping her features. She joined him in his silent watch, and they observed how the morning colors danced over the canopy, each tree stirring awake under the beckoning sun. Here, in the hush of dawn, the hush that carried both relief and readiness for future ordeals, the forest thrived in a fleeting moment of peace. It was not perfect. Remnants of the devourer's presence might still lurk, waiting for a chance to strike, but it no longer faced a fractured realm of isolated spirits. Instead, an alliance of forest denizens stood, bound by hard-earned camaraderie. Late in the afternoon, they convened at the old cedar shrine. Word of smaller disturbances had reached them. Vanishing animals at the western boundary, unsettling dreams reported by sensitive yokai. Yet, the fear that once gripped the forest no longer overshadowed their hearts. Each spirit was prepared to confront any ordeal, bolstered by the knowledge that someone, or something, would stand at their side. Karasu rose before the assembled crowd, his robes stirring in the spring breeze. "We have forced the devourer to retreat, if only for now," he began, "and we have driven out many of its minions. But the shadows we face are relentless. In every age, darkness finds new shapes to wear. We must remain vigilant, steadfast in our unity." As the evening sun bathed the shrine in resembled gold, each spirit, be they fox, tanuki, oni, or kappa, lifted their gaze. They listened to the Tengu warlord's calm but resolute counsel, feeling neither subjugated nor commanded, but guided toward a shared destiny. What had started as a desperate chorus of fear had transformed into a communal vow. "The forest is ours to protect," Karasu continued, "and protect it we shall together." A soft murmur of agreement rose, carrying the renewed sense of hope throughout the cedar grove. Overhead, birds returned to roost in the taller branches, freed of the malignant presence that had once driven them away. The wind coaxed the leaves into a gentle hum, as if singing a lullaby for the land reborn. In that solemn but serene twilight, a new era dawned for them all. Karasu stepped back, and a hush fell. The unity they had forged stood tall, like the mighty cedar thriving upon centuries of fertile soil. Darkness remained beyond the tree line, always a chance that some new abomination could creep into the night. But now the alliance was watchful. The Tengu warlord, who had once been a solitary wanderer, had become a true leader. Someone who ignited the brightest torches in the hearts of yokai and forest spirits, reminding them that unity held a power far stronger than fear. In that newfound camaraderie and healing forest hush, perhaps even the devourer, gnashing its teeth in the bowels of some distant lair, could sense that it was no longer as inevitable as it once seemed. Because at last the forest did not cower. It stood, guided by the unwavering wings of a Tengu warlord and the lion-hearted loyalty of every spirit that had pledged itself against the rising tide of evil. And so, whenever that chilling wind swept across the pines and the lanterns flickered in the boughs, the spirits no longer whispered in dread. Rather, they recalled how shadows can be overcome by steadfast hearts, how the resolute stand of a Tengu could unite them in defiance of consuming darkness. The forest breathed anew, an enduring testament to the power of an alliance born not of conquest, but of mutual hope, and to the Tengu's stand which rose tall as the cedar itself.